Welcome everyone today. I'm honoured to be sitting here today as part of our Leadership Speaker Series. This is the last of our leadership talks for this year. In the past, the former interviewers were the legendary Mr. Val Cook, may he rest in peace, and also Mr. Anthony Mitri, who is our director at the campus here. Good afternoon to everyone here, to all our leadership students. Fantastic that you're able to be here today, and to our Term 3 students. Today we'll be interviewing Mr. Tish Nyar, who's currently the Director of Operations, and please correct me if I'm wrong here, Director of Operations for Australia and New Zealand for TFE Hotels.
That's
I'm correct. Tish is also an alumni. He is the chair of our alumni board, and also the recent recipient of our 2018 Alumni Honour Board, which we had the presentations a couple of weeks ago. So this is definitely the talk to be at. We do encourage you to ask questions. As we're having our conversation, it won't be so much as scripted. We hope for a bit of storytelling. If you have something that pops up that you think will contribute, please put your hand up, and I'll try and be vigilant. And of course, at the end of the session, if you have any questions as well. So just to start us off, I thought instead of reading your entire bio and all the studies that I've done for the last few weeks, if you could start telling us about yourself and your career.
I'll give you a short version. So I started in, I don't know if you'd call it hospitality, but I started out work in the service industry when I was quite young, at about 16. I was working at McDonald's and had a choice of, in my mind, a choice of going into hotels or becoming a builder. I'm not sure which one was more viable at the time. Hotels was more money then, but I think the building industry,
definitely the moment in Sydney.
Yeah, that's going to come off. We're more reliable and long term. And at that stage, when I was about 19 or 20, I had a little bit of travel to do, and took care of that, and went into the Blue Mountain School. Made a choice of which hotel school I was going to go into, and at the time, the Blue Mountain School was the one that gave you the international accreditation, and the only one in Australia that did that, and had the live-in campus as well, which was quite attractive. Did my time there, worked through the placements and so on, and then went on to work for Amalgamated Holdings, which was Ridges back then, and did some work in nightclubs and restaurants. Moved on to Accor, where I did a cadetship with them as well in the senior management side of things. Worked my way up to a food and beverage manager level, and did the opening for the Sydney Olympic Hotels in 2000, and then cut over to Ridges. Worked with Ridges for 16 years, and through that time progressively worked my way through to becoming the area general manager based out of Sydney Airport, and then cut over to TFE probably about just nearly 2 years ago now.
Fantastic. So TFE Hotels now, I believe your CEO just left in March, if I'm correct.
Yes.
And you came on in February.
Yep.
Right, not putting anything together or saying by that.
I know I had a year with it, just over a year.
So with that in mind, I know that you've got a strong food and beverage background. So would that be part of the reason why you joined the group, or looking at?
With TFE, it was all-round operations was very interesting, and the group's going through 41% growth over the next 18 months.
41%.
We've got I've got 4 more hotels to open in the next sort of 12 months, and then 17 the 12 months following that in the Australia and New Zealand portfolio.
Goodness.
That growth curve was really attractive. Plus, we're investing heavily in our products and refurbishing. At the moment, I've got about 4 or 5 hotels under refurbishment or coming out of refurbishment, with more to go into the other end of that pipeline.
Yeah.
And then the general growth of the company, family-orientated company in a joint venture, so privately owned, which is quite different. I'm used to working in a public company. Yeah. Culturally, that's a little bit more unique. But the opportunity to grow and develop and take care of it. Currently, my portfolio sits at around about 63 hotels, and that'll be 100 by the end of 2021.
63.
Yeah.
So 41% or 42% growth, opening 17 or so hotels over the next short
2
period.
years. Yeah.
So how does recruitment look and positioning for that?
Well, as I was saying to you before, we did a pipeline check the other day, and it's probably the one thing that's keeping myself and our people and capabilities team awake. We need around about just under 1,000 heads in the business on top of what we've already got to fill that pipeline from a duty manager level and above. So to take care of any normal attrition. So forecasting about 1,000 people over the next 24 months in management positions and above.
So you were obviously looking outside as well, but are you identifying talent within the organisation to move up quite rapidly?
Heavily. So I've got 5 area general managers across my region, which is the Australia-New Zealand area. Plus we've got about 4 people and capabilities team members. We got together down in Marysville, which is just outside of Canberra, for 2 days, and we went through. We've built our database out and created a more robust, data package on our teams.
Yep.
And we spent a number of days going through all of our top talent and deciding where the skills gaps were, putting together more detailed and refined development plans. We've always got them in the background, but when you need to create a really robust team, you're going to have to spend more time on that.
Yeah, I was doing a bit of research and reading with the massive growth, as everyone is aware of, particularly in the city. For the first time in over 21 years, we've built our first new 5-star hotel, being the Sofitel down at Darling Harbour. We've got the W under construction at Darling Harbour. We've got new construction at Circular Quay. We've got Kerry Packers Casino doing something sometime. With that as well, I've read about that rapid growth and promotion and opportunities to fill gaps in the industry has had its positives, but also I've read about the negatives. Right? Because we have to fill those gaps, we're forcing people up straight away, and depending on their know-how, more so than the institutional training and development, and the challenges that's causing, particularly with people that aren't as well qualified or experienced in managing people and building positive relationships. How does that look for you, and how are you identifying that specifically?
Culture in any organisation, I think, is a cornerstone to its success or failure, as most of your studies will tell you. It's very much, technology is helping us develop the skill sets and helping us skills gap the technical stuff. So as a revenue manager, you've got a whole vast variety of tools, algorithms, mathematics and studies that have been built out to help you refine those skills and rely on information, data and technology. What we found interestingly is that revenue managers, when we start to cluster, their skills gap is very much around people management. So coordinating annual leave, simple stuff, coordinating to make sure that all of your people aren't on annual leave at the same time, how to manage sick calls, how to manage performance issues within your team is something that we're finding that we have to assist them with. Yeah. We have the team members and capabilities to make sure that once we've recognised that as a need, we can fill that gap. But people management, guest and people management is probably the key issue for us to develop when I look at any of the development plans.
Yeah.
And that does come with learning experience and time. It does take some effort to learn how to do it because it's an organic environment. There's no definitive rules. You can't plug the numbers in and get the answer.
Very true.
Because you're dealing with issues, and people are the most expensive resource outside of the asset. Energy's coming up, but our payroll is anything as high in food and beverage, anything up to 50% of your total revenue count. So it's huge.
That is a massive one. Now, there are a lot of offshoot questions I want to go into, but going back to the rapid growth, I'm not being biased here or anything, but...
you can be, that's fine.
As a success coach, as you know, it's my responsibility to assist all the students here on building their careers, matching them up, their talents and values with the right organisations. This leads me, obviously, you just said that you're looking for great talent and you're expanding very fast. A lot of our students, if not 99%, are tunnel visioned, and no offence, into the five-star brands. You know, they look at the household names. You know, we look at the Marriotts, the Hyatts, the IHG, etc. It could be their cultural background, in the fact their families are insistent on particular brands or five-star as well, right? You haven't ventured a massive amount into the five-star area, particularly if I'm not correct, and please correct me if I am. You started service departments, right? It's grown from there. You've obviously increasing the brand, you're refurbishing, the Adinas have come online, and the new ones, particularly the one in North Sydney, that you brought as well. So with a captive audience and everything like that, why TFE? Why that brand? And what could we do to educate the audience on the specifics on five-star?
I suppose within TFE we do have our collection hotels, which are starting to grow. We've got two now with Carlisle and Hotel Currajong, and there's more to come. Those collection hotels are very much in that boutique five-star space. If you have a look at the Carlisle in Brisbane that we've just opened, it's an incredible product. The owners have invested quite wisely and backed their hotel. It's probably one of the best products that I've seen and worked with, and I've done some time with QT Hotels and Resorts, just to give you a benchmark of what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. Within TFE, the opportunity to work across multiple brands, work across national and international borders, and get experience as we develop our food and beverage product as well as our rooms product in shiny new toys across the whole gamut of hospitality. And what I find and have dealt with over the years, and I think I've talked to students from the Blue Mountain School on and off since I've left, which was long enough ago, mm-hmm. that five-star is great and it does suit a number of people. Speed to growth ratios are not as strong as the four-star market, three-star market. Experience levels and ability to diversify and move is a little bit more restricted. They do expect you to work for extended periods of time. As well in the four and a half star market, your ability to get training across a number of different departments in a variety of skill sets is much stronger. Because they're relying on people to be multi-skilled, they train them to be multi-skilled. In five stars, you tend to get siloed. If you're in food and beverage, you will be in food and beverage, and you won't do a lot of cross-training into front office without really driving it. And I remember facing that challenge when I first started in hotels at the region of Sydney, of really having to beg and plead to get into front office and get some experience there.
Same challenges we're students are facing here.
And I guess it was interesting because he's actually a very close friend now, that he was the front office manager that I had to beg and plead with when I came in as a cadet. He was then my EAM about 15 years later when I took over a large inner city hotel. And it was quite funny to share some stories because we hadn't reconnected or talked much over the years, but we remembered each other because there was a funny story in the back office. But that I guess what I'm trying to say is that the experience and cross-training you'll get in the 3 to 4.5 star bracket will be much stronger, categorically. We've got a lot of new product. We've got a lot of refurbished product within TFE. Mm-hmm. If you have a look at the Adina Brisbane product, unfortunately it's closed at the moment because of a malicious damage issue. Adina Brisbane is a beautiful hotel. It's a heritage hotel and really stunning. If you have a look at the work we're doing at the Vibe Sydney at the moment, I was down there this morning with doing a builder's update. It's going to be a really great hotel within the Sydney CBD. So across the board, we've punched above our weight over the years, but TFE is coming up in its product and its product quality, and has a large variety of brands to play in across pretty much every major CBD location in Australia and New Zealand.
So, except for, and not promoting the brand externally, I'll call it internally, with students and potential talent acquisition, how do you think to best do that? How are you going to key or target those areas for potential talent that maybe haven't been introduced to that sort of market or your brand yet?
Yeah, I suppose doing, just coming in and talking about it a little bit in these sort of environments, but also being much more active in the space of promoting. We've recently, we've got an academy program which runs 3 streams of training. So FLP, which is the sort of mainstream direct entry experience, housekeeping, front office and all that sort of thing. Yep. MLP, which is targeted at that duty manager, F&B manager level. And SMLP, which is that senior leadership level of EAMs and so on, who get directly mentored by, you know, I've got a mentee and the chief operating officer has one. It's restricted to about 6. I've just organised the intake recently, and we've done 50, and we're going to open that quarterly now.
Yep.
Next round's coming up, and we've decided to open that out to external applicants.
Oh.
So we've changed the way we were doing it, and we're also reworking the program to modernise it a bit. We had it sort of, hadn't touched it for a little while, I'd found, and we needed to bring it up to speed. So that's probably one of the best ways. For the senior leaders wanting to come into the business, there is always duty manager positions going, because that's the real, as an entry into hotels in a leadership position with a strong education, that's probably the best place to go, because you get a good feeling of the entire hotel in and out.
Excellent. So I was doing, look, I won't lie, I've done a lot of research on you and the group as well. And a lot of videos online and little speeches you made, particularly the snippets and the stuff for our alumni here at Blue Mountains. One of the things that came up, and I seem to see a pattern, and it's something I try to convey to the students as well, particularly when it involves RevPAR. Right, so with the 5-star hotels, your return on profit seems to be a lot lower, and there's a lot more expenses, as opposed to maybe your brand and 4- and 5-star hotels. So educating myself there, and then trying to educate the students that from a revenue driving potential, there's a lot more opportunity within those areas, or within the 4.5 star brand. Also, just reiterating what you mentioned, opportunity to cross-train and everything. I happen to agree with you. I come from a 5-star hotel background. I'm a lot more mature and older now, and it took me a lot longer to climb the ladder. I'm a believer in food and beverage. I have a passion for food and beverage, and I believe everyone should start in food and beverage. That's my choice, and it's something I want to talk to you about, obviously. My speech to everyone when they want to come in and they say they want to be a GSA, I just pretend that just goes in one ear and out the other, right? And I start with my food and beverage speech, you know? And it usually takes me about an hour, right, with each student, but I finally get them to try and understand as well. So I've talked about the RevPAR, you know, reintroduce the concept of more opportunities in those your brand, but also competition that's out there as well. Right, now, particularly with revenue managers being snapped up from hotels, you've got competition from third-party sellers. You've got the Trivagos, the whatif.coms, lastminute.com, etc. I wanted to talk about how you deal with that competitive market, right, but also how you deal with Airbnb. Right, so I put Airbnb in a separate category because, as well, if we're looking from revenue, these third-party providers take a rather large commission. I've seen a lot of hotels put up a wall against Airbnb, but now I'm starting to see a lot more people embrace the Airbnb concept and try to bring it on board. So I probably haven't asked a specific question, but your opinions on that.
So, like any industry, we learn to love to hate Airbnb for the first sort of 6 to 12 months, and then we realised it wasn't going away. I think an acceptance of the fact that you have a new competitor in the market and there's a dynamic. Now, Airbnb technically wasn't actually a new competitor. Guest houses have been around for a long time. Jesus and Mary were turned away from one and ended up sleeping out in the shack out the back. So that style of accommodation has been around forever. It's just Airbnb made it easier for the owner-operator to put it on the market. And it made it more visible. Plus, because of that ease, you had an increase of available room stock. Now, within Sydney, there's probably about 4,000 Airbnb listings that I know of. I think it's actually higher than that now. I haven't looked at it for a while. So how do you deal with that? You deal with it by the fact that you accept the fact that you have a significant new competitor in the eyes of your guest because it's more highly visible. You have a look at your own strengths and weaknesses and play to those. no different to how we had to deal with it when TripAdvisor came online. We'd been dealing with guest feedback for many, many, many years. It was just the visibility of that feedback was quite high.
Yep.
And we had to change the way we spoke to our guests because of the visibility of it. And what happened was we started to change to talking to an audience rather than to one guest when we talked about online reviews. And it's no different to Airbnb. Yes, we need to make sure we're playing on a level playing field because government isn't imposing the same compliance issues on Airbnbs as they are on hotels,
Yep.
which I think will change over the coming years. We just need to look at what are the strengths and weaknesses of an Airbnb. So for example, with our Vibe brand, we talk about local connection and my local community and all those sort of things to try and tackle and market the way we talk to our guests while giving them a full service hotel experience in a safe environment,
Yep.
in a controlled environment rather than an environment that you don't know who else has the key to the room. You haven't checked in, you've actually gone to a lockbox and gotten a key. You haven't had a check-in and arrival experience. There's no one to ring to help you with medical emergencies or assistance in pretty much anything.
Yeah.
So we play to those strengths and keep going. And just like anything, we improvise, overcome and adapt.
I got the best term in the world. Adapt and overcome. And just watching it as well, I think it's going to come full circle. Obviously the new ideas and the new flashy toys and everything like that, like Airbnb, just as Uber is and everything. And what I found now, and I'll be honest, I do look at Airbnb sometimes when I'm traveling, but for me it's all price pointed. And I'm starting to realise that very quickly Airbnb is just as expensive sometimes than staying in a hotel. So for me, in the end, I'm not going to quibble over a couple of dollars, and I'd rather the infrastructure of a hotel. Again, as you mentioned, the safety, and also the people contact. The one thing Airbnb doesn't have that I've noticed is no interaction with human beings, right? And everything we do here, and especially in hospitality, in my opinion, boils around building positive relationships and how you interact as well. But also, just leading on a little bit from that, you mentioned TripAdvisor and how passionate a lot of hotels took that up and very seriously. Do you believe that that would have, just because of that and just the exposure to the open market, has lifted the standards and service of hotels because of that?
I'd say at the bottom end of the market it has. So it's called people to account that weren't necessarily good at what they did in the first place.
Yeah.
How it's affected us in a market where you had a management company, whether it's TFE, AC or Ridges or whoever, everyone took great pride in their products. It gave us an opportunity and it gave us data it gave us much better data to have conversations with our owners and our guests about our strengths and weaknesses and where the investment opportunities were in the asset and where the investment opportunities were in training our teams. So if I have a look at it now, TripAdvisor actually makes up quite a small proportion of our guest feedback now. Booking.com and pretty much any of those channels, when you have a look at it, providing us with more data. But if I look at, I did 15 CapEx walks or investment walks with owners in the last couple of months. And every time we talked back to Revenate or Trust You or whatever the system is that you teach these teams in regards to guest feedback, we're able to sit down and have a meaningful owner on a $100,000, $200,000, $1 million investment and saying, we have a problem with the beds in this hotel. Here's our complaint ratio. This is how many guests we've had. This is how many complaints we've had. Your beds are 10 years old. They're at the end of their viable lifespan. Let's invest $100,000 in beds in a 100-room hotel. The owner sits there and there's no real heavy discussion that takes place. They go, yep, that's the best place for the investment. So they're not working on that subjectivity that used to be the case. The hotel manager may have wanted the walls to be painted bright green or the carpet to be purple and not spend the money on the beds at the time. It creates that subjectivity, but this gives us the data of what our guests want and a direct correlation to return on investment, because you can usually see the return on investment come through.
Excellent. I'm going to shift the conversation a little because we've got leadership potential students in the room, and I'd like to talk about you a bit more. So as a general manager, I know these questions are going to come up, so I'm going to try and preempt some of them and everything like that. So a lot of the questions are in the room. I'm not going to presume are going to be around how can I get there in the fastest possible time. I'm looking at your biography. I just want to concentrate on the GM's position. Let's start with Ridges, because I think it's I too worked for Ridges back in the old days, and I think it was a very good learning platform, and what they had to do as well, all the way from HR being centralised and everything like that, and properties acting independently in my day. Right, to you also, and I want to also bridge on the opening of new hotels. So my question is going to be, you had dual roles at some time. I think you were down at Ridges Airport and opening that hotel, amongst others as well. Another one in Brisbane, if I'm not correct.
Yep.
If I'm correct. Also with that, you also held the hat. It was Area General Manager of Strategic
Investments or something like that. Yeah.
So let's go with number one. What is an Area General Manager of Strategic Investments? Right, and talk about that. How did you do the dual role? Right, and then we'll go on from there.
Area General Manager Strategic Investments was, at the time, a combination of working with a couple of key owners that we had in the company that were looking to invest and develop new hotels. So at that stage, there was some investors who'd put their money into. I'd worked with them at Darwin, rebadging those two properties when they took them over, and then did the opening for the airport, and it was similar money, similar JVs going into the money in joint ventures going into the money into Brisbane. So working with that package of owners, because there was multiple owners into a variety of partnerships into each of those investments.
Yeah.
And then dealing with or giving support to owners who were not necessarily in hotels that were performing as well as they should have been at the time. So it was quite a unique opportunity to work with both strong owners and strong investment, but also owners who had distressed assets, I would probably put the term around.
Yeah.
So really interesting. Having that diversity was fantastic, and it was something that I loved about hotels as well, is the diversity. But quite challenging and unique in finding a balance to life, travel, work, and making sure that we had focus on the right things for both the new openings plus the other assets we had.
Did it happen in reality? Was there a balance? Could you do it? Did something suffer?
Probably to some extent at that stage, no. I'd found how to best balance, and to best balance is all about your team and your people and having the right people around you that work for your skill set and your chemistry. Something I've found over the years is that you can have two exceptionally high performers working together and they don't work well together because of the chemistry, and that's that organics. Sometimes that doesn't necessarily play out well. But having the right teams in the right place with good communication tools and just being organised and having project plans, time allocations and strong communication. It did happen. It was a big learning curve. I did get into trouble from my wife a couple of times because I wasn't home enough, and I had two teenage kids at that stage.
Girls by any chance?
No, one of each. One of each.
Okay. I meant that in the most nicest way, and we'll go into that a little bit later.
So it was a very interesting time, and it set me up exceptionally well for the role that I've got now.
Wow. So just leading on from that, I was talking to some of the students just prior to the class and thinking that I'd get the same response from them, and I didn't. I got two varying responses. Most of them obviously want to achieve. They want to go into management or leadership positions. I'm sure most of them would love to step right in there, and we'll go into that later, and everything like that, and how we manage expectations. What I found from the conversation though, and just before this, and it wasn't pre-prepped, was I had people saying that they're quite content being a general manager and running a hotel and watching the cogs tick and plodding along with that. The others, one in particular that I was talking to, wasn't interested in that at all. So not even a general manager, was more interested in looking at, and you delve just a little bit into it then, if we can talk about it a bit more, identifying challenges within hotels and bringing them up to standard. And it got me to start thinking. Unfortunately, it was about 3 minutes before we walked up to the stage here. Do you think that there are those two kinds of people, or are all general managers generally driven by looking at how they can continually improve?
I think it's funny, I was having this conversation with an owner yesterday because I'm transitioning some people in and out of his business, and it's horses for courses and everybody's different. I went to a 20-year presentation this morning for a breakfast chef at Travelodge Wynyard down the road, and he's done that for 20 years.
Yep.
And I can tell you that he's a happy man. He comes in at 5 o'clock in the morning and has done for 20 years, leaves at 2 in the afternoon, is really happy doing that. And he's one of the few chefs in our company that can, by himself, with no kitchen hand, serve 250 people breakfast in the morning, clean up and go home on time.
Yeah.
And do it properly. I also talked to an owner recently about the difference between a manager who can open a hotel really well and someone who does a lot of that distressed or high pressure environment work versus someone who will be in their business for 3 to 4 years quite happily.
Yeah.
And I've got a lot of respect for pretty much anyone who works in our industry. And I've got a lot of time for people who know what they want to do and are happy doing what they do. I've got some hotel managers in our group that have been with us for 10 and 15 years and they've only worked in 2 properties. But they're happy doing that, but they're good at it. And it's a matter of making sure that you're good at it for an extended period of time if you want to sit still.
Yep.
If you don't want to sit still and you want to go through that intensity, that you have the mental capacity to deal with the stress that comes with that high pressure environment for prolonged periods of time. I talked to some hotel managers recently about what it's like to go through an opening, and it is very much, I learned earlier on, I started to actually train before I'd go into a hotel opening because I knew that my life was going to be decimated for around about 3 to 6 months, physically and mentally, and talk to my family and prepare them for the stress that we're about to go through.
Yeah.
A little bit like I did when I was coming into this position was be ready for that pressure, but if you're mentally prepared for it and you're physically prepared for it, you can go through it. So there are very much 2 different people. I've started to see an emergence of some people who can do the opening and then move into a BAU, I would call it, or a long-term piece.
Yep.
But some people get addicted to that adrenaline of the opening and that pressure and intensity, but you do get a bit of a burnout out of that as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I'm looking or listening to everything you said, and just on how you manage people, talent acquisitions, different needs and wants, who matches up. You said horses for courses as well. You're also in a regional role over 2 countries. Right, right now, where do your priorities lie?
People and owners.
Okay.
So making sure that we have the right people in the right place with the right skill set. One of the skill sets that we recognised with our company and the way we'd grown up was that we needed to increase the commercial acumen for our hotel managers, and I've just spent 18 months, we're just in the middle of launching it now, developing a commercial acumen program for the needs of TFE and how we operate. And we're just rolling that out through Australia and New Zealand. We've invested a lot of money in that and making sure that people know how to read a P&L right through to a balance sheet, to understanding how we like to see return on investment business cases proposed so that we can take them to board or ownership levels and the detail required in that, and improving the quality of the capital expenditure plans that we have on the hotels. You know, you're talking up to $4 million a year on some properties where you're investing money.
Yeah.
So you need to do your sums there. So making sure that our people have got the skill sets in alignment with where we're going. Making sure our people know how to manage people, and making sure that the right people are lined up with the right owners. Because again, it's a chemistry. You do create a chemistry. It's not just a skill set that you need for the hotel. It's a skill set of how to interact with that particular owner as well. Because you have institutional investors who are quite technical, and then you have some personalities who are sole investors in hotels, and you need to create some kind of relationship there.
So you've hit the nail on the head for me. So again, I'll be biased. I'm all about talent acquisition and recruitment. It's even though I started in food and beverage and did the typical course up through front office and then sales and marketing, reservations and HR. But my passion ultimately, and it took me 49 years to get here, is all about identifying talent. You mentioned that quite a few times, and you say it quite freely and easily sometimes. I look at the complexities of it, and now I've got the opportunity to share that the experience that I've had with students. So with students, we have a fantastic group that's here at the college, right? They do come and see us, and we talk about their careers. Probably 90% of our conversation that I try to steer around is trying to introduce them to the concept of matching them up with the right organisations and property and management teams. So they come in more so with the, I want this, this, this and this. This is the brand I want, this is the reason I want it, and everything like that. I complement that and try to introduce them to new things. So we are veering along the lines now of, I want to be a GM straight away, or I want to be a GSA or a front office manager. It does take time for me to introduce those things to students. I think it benefits them in the long run. The biggest challenge then is for them to try and go out and research what best suits them. And that's really hard when you're either 19 to 26 or some of our mature age students that are changing their profession and going into a new one like this as well. It's easy for us to sit here, and preach the gospel. So I'm probably asking you, and more so for the students here, to go along the lines and perhaps tell the story of where you think it's best to start, while they're working at the moment casually, while they're doing their studies. In your opinion, what do you think is the best case scenario to get into a hotel and work your way through? Maybe we'll go on from there.
I think that to get into hospitality is having a fairly open mindset. I've mentored a number of students out of the school and out of the industry over the years, and that mindset of that brand is for me, and that brand alone. It's I guess there's a twofold effect. One is if you have an open mind and create a broader net of what you're willing to do, where you're willing to go, and what you're willing to try, the opportunities will take you to paths that you don't necessarily expect you'll go down.
Agreed.
The other one is that speed to growth as well, is that opportunities come up in unexpected spaces. I've got a hotel manager who was highly ambitious and so keen to become an area general manager that I was working with, and I think that he's a very talented guy, but he wasn't quite ready to deal with a large portfolio of hotels. We wanted to give him something more expanded, so I created a cluster position for him, and the last place he wanted to go was Darwin, so we sent him there. Just out of pure need, that's where I had an opportunity that fit into his career ambitions and would give him the growth that he needed. Now, he had an open mind and was willing to go with Darwin. He's doing an exceptionally good job, and he's turning a hotel around at the moment. We had an issue in the Darwin market because oil and gas has come off, and we're waiting for about another 2 years before it comes back on again, where we need to take some fairly significant action to stop the hotel from bleeding for the wet period, and he's working on a program that will save us probably around about $500,000 in that operation over a period of time. He's working with teams, he's deploying teams elsewhere and maintaining, because we need to keep our people engaged, not just lose them. He's making sure that we're maintaining those people in positions that are viable. But having that open mind. He was in Christchurch and he's now in Darwin. There's two very different locations. The short version is, I suppose, if you go fishing with a fishing line, you're going to catch one fish. If you go fishing with a net, then you're going to catch a lot more. And that's no different to your career. If you have an open mind and say, I'm willing to look out there and see what's going on in the marketplace and see where the opportunities lie, they may not be with a 5-star brand. They may be with a boutique brand, and that's a good compromise. To a 5-star, because a boutique brand will give you an opportunity to be much more engaged with the guests, give you the diversity across the positions within the property, because they still tend to cross-train their teams, and they look and feel like a 5-star but operate like a 4 quite often if you have a look at most of those brands. Have a look at what your compromises are and have a look at where the growth is and where the opportunities lie. But also go out and trial it. You talk about food and beverage, you go and have a degustation menu because you want a little bit of everything to start with, and then you decide on one item and you'll go back to that restaurant and try that one piece later on.
I like the analogy.
Very similar with your career. Go out and taste test a few different things. I've worked with Ridges twice, with a core, and now with TFE in apartment-only products, in full food and beverage service operations, and so on. Give it a go and have a try, because I never expected to stay in food and beverage or grow up through food and beverage. It just happened to be something that I tried and became passionate about.
That's the same sort of thing. I'm going to quote you on something, if that's okay, through my research. A previous speaker talk that you did, following on from our conversation. And I quote, when speaking at the school during various leadership series, you said to the students, "It's a matter of patience and time. It's really important to go through and get the experience before you achieve that position." So I think what you said complements it well.
Yeah, I suppose with that, I guess that was off the back of, it was quite funny, Val, who became quite a good friend over the years, quoted me a few times, because I didn't realise this, and it's happened twice in my life, where I said to myself when I came out of hotel school, I wanted to become a general manager within 10 years. And everyone was like, why 10 years? And I said, well, I've had a look around and I've seen a few mates or colleagues or people that I've researched achieve it within 5 to 7 years. But I've also watched them either stagnate in the position and not go into larger hotels or develop, which is something I wanted to do, or they've fallen over and now they're working in another industry. And when I started looking around and talking to people, I was finding that if you get there too fast, you don't necessarily set yourself up for success. There's a reason that in Australia you have to drive 120 hours before you're allowed behind the wheel to do a test. It's because you need that experience. So I would liken it to that. You don't learn all of those nuances of putting the car in drive, looking for hazards, turning, putting the indicator on all at the same time without thinking about it, without developing that skill set over time. And hotels are no different. They're very dynamic businesses that are quite complicated, and it does take time to embed those skills. It takes time to make some mistakes and learn from those mistakes.
Yeah.
It just takes time. It is speeding up because there is that technology that helps you with the skill set. So maybe it's down to 8 years. There's no hard and fast rule, but experience will give you success, and not enough experience with too quick a success. Businesses go broke all the time because people go into them before they're ready.
Yes, and do their homework. And following on from that, following on from a lot of things, I think Jim Collins wrote a great book, Good to Great, and how good companies become great companies. And I think 1/3 of the book was talking about recruitment. And there's a great saying that I love, and he said, make sure you've got the right people on the right bus, sitting on the right seat, heading in the right direction. And I believe that's everything that you've encompassed today. One thing that's happening in this country at the moment is big talk about equality. And equality in the sense of male and female. I'll go into that area. There's equality everywhere and over a great many things. An anniversary is yesterday, but we'll talk male and female ratios. I've always found it quite interesting. You hear things on television all the time that say males get a better opportunity, there's better pay, they're promoted better, and they're more looked after than females are. I've always found that quite unique because I come from a hotel background where you start in a hotel and everyone gets the same pay and it's all fair and equitable. And I have to be honest, 90% of all my line managers were women. Right, so I think to myself I'm trying to understand that. But I also understand that we've got a lot of international students here. Right, they will take things quite literally that they see on our news, right, and I've tried to talk to them about it. What I've learnt from it is maybe not so much the male to female ratios. The concern that came back with me was it's because of my cultural background or the country I come from. And I actually get quite specific explanations going, that hotel doesn't like Vietnamese or Indians or Indian culture. I don't believe that personally. I do hear it a lot from students. I put their mind at ease. At the end of the day, if you're the right person for the right job, whether you're red, white or blue, right, that's what matters. Right? Just as a reassurance, it'd be nice to hear from you. What do you look at when you see a human being that you're interviewing or that you're looking at talent and trying to grow or promote, right? How do you approach that, and what do you look at, and what don't you look at?
Definitely not race, colour, creed,
And I have
sex
no doubt on that
or
one. Mm.
If I have a look, and I guess on a personal level, and I can't speak for the industry as a whole, I can speak for what I commonly see, which is there just isn't a lot. We work in a highly diverse industry, and at Ridges World Square, we intentionally went after multicultural and a combination of male and female in the operation, because we had to have it. We had Korean Airlines, we had Air China, China Southern, British Airways as our crew. We had 120 crew staying with us a night from multiple ratios. We had inbound coming in from Germany, United States, India and China were the core sort of areas. Plus we dealt with probably about 7,000 to 10,000 Japanese school students a year as well. Now, in that case, you cannot, if you were to say I'm a white Australia all male hotel, it's not going to work. You can't service your guests effectively because you don't have the cultural sensitivities and that understanding. Now, I think that a lot of the technology again is helping us with interpretation. We can talk to our phones and it will interpret and create a connection with the guest verbally, but the nuances in there that don't always help. We don't recognise that in some cultures laughter and smiling is a response to tension and issues. So it's misinterpreted and creates problems. We don't understand that the nuances of the Indian culture versus the Indonesian culture versus the German culture, who are highly direct and not as emotional, I guess, or as soft as Australians or other Europeans. So you need to have that. In any property, you need to have a male to female ratio. You cannot send a male up to a room where a female guest is going through a health issue, potentially a sensitive health issue. You need to have females on board. If I have a look at the hotel managers I've employed, they've been Indian, Australian, European, South America, and that was the experiences that I had with the general managers that I was dealing with today alone. So, and I guess to put everyone else's mind at ease in general, I have a daughter who's 19 and she's currently studying in hospitality. And everyone said, are you going to talk her out of it? And I said, no, it's given me a great life. I've worked with Rachel Argerman, female CEO, Jane Hastings, female CEO at Event Now. I've worked with plenty of female bosses, and on a number of occasions I've actually preferred doing that to a few of the males that I've worked with over the years. So yes, you are in any industry, especially hospitality where it's so people orientated, you're going to have your good people and your bad people to work with.
Yes.
You're going to have the people who may create that filtration of, I only want a particular stereotype of recruitment. But I really believe that in general hospitality doesn't do that. And I haven't seen it if I look at pretty much any of the operations I've worked at over the years.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree with you 100%. And I didn't mean that question in any negative way. My experience throughout the whole of my career, that has never been an issue. And in fact, I think the hospitality industry takes care of it best. Right,
I guess the only thing I'm finding in general is the language of the country that you're working in. Your language skills around that need to be refined, and you need to spend a little bit of time and effort in that. I was talking to some team members today about going to Europe, and it's a German-speaking country, and we were talking to them about how do they develop the skill sets for that country, because the core language is German. Working outside of a German skill set, German language skill set, is a little bit harder. No different to Australia, where it's an English-based language. Written communication, verbal communication needs to be there, and you need to work hard on that.
yes.
It's the same with pretty much any of the countries that I've looked at. Understanding the cultural sensitivities, understanding the language, and that just aligns itself with the skill sets you need for whichever operation you go into.
Yeah, and I agree. And in this situation, you know, it takes time. Right, and the catch-22 possibly is that the best way to achieve a better grasp of an English language is to work in an environment where everyone's speaking English.
I'll throw yourself in, but that's the same with any language.
Yeah.
If I look at Japanese, which was huge when I was coming through the school, we all
Myself as well.
had the Japanese skill sets, and we did the cultural sensitivity, and we needed to learn the language. And the teams who did best in that were the ones who went and lived and breathed
And
Japanese.
it was actually at Ridges that, so back in our day, when we were a little bit younger, there was a huge Japanese market. The economy was boosting back then, and tourism was promoted heavily here. And working on cruise boats and cruise companies around the most beautiful harbour in the world, 90% of our clientele was Japanese. So Ridges sent us on to a Japanese course. Right? We learnt the basics, you know, from the greetings, cultural awareness as well, you know, and everything we could to look after. And that quickly changed, right? And we lost the Japanese market, and along came the Korean market, right? And then off we went again. An exceedingly challenging language to grasp, but again, we did what it took as well to do that. I won't go too much down that road because we are coming close to an end, and there are some more specific questions. And probably going back to general manager days and everything like that, because everyone is interested in leadership. You're with Ridges for 16 years, roughly. Right? All of a sudden, TFE. Right? So there's that transition that you've got the loyalty, you've been there for a long time. Right? I would have to ask, and if you're allowed to say in any way you like, what made you move, given how big Ridges and Amalgamated, which is, I forget what they're called now because they're rebranded, Event, sorry, yeah, you mentioned before, has grown so largely as well, you know, and Alan Ridge behind the helm and everything like that as well. What was that pivotal moment? What was that day when you realised that there's other opportunities, or you had to leave, or were you pushed, or anything you want to tell us?
They fired me. I'm kidding. That's all right. I think 16 years was a long time, and I'd had 2 children, lived in I don't know how many cities, and done how many different jobs within Ridges, and I was realising that I was getting to an age where I said to myself, what am I going to be doing when I'm 55 at the time, which was sort of 7 or 8 years away, and what do I want to be doing, and what do I want to set myself up for? And I had a look at Ridges, and I was very comfortable, and we talked about, you know, you could do this job for a long time. I didn't move because I was unhappy. I didn't move because I didn't enjoy my workplace. I actually really loved it. I moved because there was an opportunity to expand from a smaller portfolio into a significant portfolio and have that growth and set myself up for that next phase of my life, which was sort of at the other end of my career. They say that in the age bracket that I'm in is the time to really take advantage of the experience that you've had and really leverage that up. And the opportunity to work with that many hotels, work with that many different brands, and work with a team of people that I got to know during the interview process over a variety of talks, that was the right move for me. And it was a bit of intuition as well, because I'd talked to a few people over a number of years about, you know, you get phone calls and so on, and talked to friends and colleagues in the industry, and found that it felt right. The job was right. The timing was good. Saying goodbye was hard but easy. It was a simple transition, and it sounds a little bit organic, but opportunity and growth of skill set while being comfortable where I was felt good. I didn't leave when I was under pressure, under huge amounts of pressure, because the property wasn't performing and I wasn't performing. I left at a time. Theatre, they say, leave them wanting more, and I prefer to do it that way than leave when you're under a cloud. Yeah,
absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more. And going on from that as well, particularly with our students here, you read a lot. If you're unhappy with your job, leave and go somewhere else, and try new things, because life's too short. And of course, I agree with that. I'm also with you on the fact that leave on a high. So at the end of the day, given you talked about experiences, what you've done previously, and opportunities and growth, for me that sort of stuff comes down to the relationships you've built over that time as well. right? So opportunities present themselves, you know, especially when you are doing well and things are ticking along and it's quite comfortable, and you're saying the transition wasn't as hard as you thought. I had the same sort of transition from hotels into education here, and I was doing quite well, if I don't say so myself. Right? But then I was always thinking at the back of my mind, because it was a recruitment, you know, I'd like to work with younger people and helping them and guiding them in their careers. You know, the opportunity came along, you know, and it felt like you know, an easy transition, like I glided over. Right? We left on happy terms, you know, be able to, most of those people I left were now mentors, and I communicate with quite a lot, and it sort of follows you around at that time at all. So as we start to draw to a close to this interview, I'm probably going to ask specific questions, like if you were to give, and it's very hard to do, and I don't think I've come up with the question or the answer yet, one bit of advice to everyone in this room, being future leaders, given the experiences that you've had, what bit of advice would you impart on them?
Probably a couple of things. One is work with the team that works well, and over the years you'll find you'll have sweet spots where you'll work with a group of people that you create that long-term relationship with. And Jim Collins has got another book called, so he's got Good to Great and Built to Last. And Built to Last talks a lot about working with people that you enjoy working with, and you have that right dynamic, and it goes back to that chemistry piece.
Yeah.
Find the teams that work well for you and enjoy the moment when that comes together, because that doesn't last forever. And if I look at my career, the times that I've really absolutely excelled has been when I've had a team of people that I'm working with, senior, junior, and peers, that everyone's getting on really well. Everyone's got a like-minded approach to work, and covering each other's backs and making sure that the financial and strategic goals are well aligned. Getting into that moment is incredibly valuable. Recognizing it and enjoying it is incredibly valuable. I guess I go back to the other piece, is that getting a variety of experiences and facing the challenges. I was talking to someone this morning about opening and closing a hotel within 12 months with an owner who had financial difficulties. That 12 months of having a new child, opening a hotel, having to close it again even though it was performing well, which was heartbreaking, and having the experiences of that 12 months was almost like going through a university degree. We put 2 night auditors in jail for fraud. We dealt with someone who, it was an incredible 12 months. We dealt with another guy who was a professional fraudster it was a bizarre 12 months. But again, you talked about leaving or staying on in adversity. It depends on the adversity, and it depends on the reason. So sometimes having the tenacity to stick it out in the tough times will teach you an awful lot, as a lot of hoteliers found during the GFC back in 07 to 09.
Yeah.
Recognising why you want to leave or why you want to stay through either the adversity or the good times. Recognising your environment and deciding what you're going to do with that opportunity at the time is probably the other one.
Excellent.
And you cast a net, you're going to catch a lot more fish. So if you're starting out, go and taste test and trial a few different operations, a few different streams of the operation, and potentially a few different brands, because you've got the time now to do it.
Yeah, and some excellent advice. Now, I could keep talking for hours, because not only do I love the sound of my own voice, but it's a pleasure interviewing you. I need to open it up to our students, right, as we start to close up and everything. Is there anyone who would like to ask any questions to Tish? Right, this is the man, alumni, went to our college, #1 college, right, has had some extraordinary experiences. Right. Any questions out there? Anyone want to ask for advice? Anyone need a job? Right. Philip, I know that there's something that you'd want to ask. Right.
Where are you off to?
I have an interview in the US, but that's in finance, working on Wall Street, that I'm going to in February. But I'm going to try to find something in Europe, because I'm hesitate going back into finance, and I want to stay in hotels. So I'm kind of splitting what I want to do in hotels, and because I would like to go and experience more the 3-star, 4-star, as you talked about earlier, and really got the diversity and learn more. But it's hard to find I've been working for IHG now for 2 years. I want to learn something new. So.
We've got plenty of hotels in Europe. We do. Oh, there's about a dozen at the moment. There's about another 10 to come online.
How do you feel that tack could be a question, the markets in between? Have you feel like the running the owners, particularly the owners in Europe compared to Australia, compared to Asia, are they demanding similar from you and from the hotels, or very different?
I think owners have changed in the last. Well, I think I've been doing this just under 30 years now, and owners and their expectations on the business has definitely changed. You used to have, I suppose, and you still see it in the Middle East, where there's a lot of money and they want that pride of product and so on, and they're not as fussed about the bottom line as institutional investors, but more and more owners are expecting for $100 million investment, $200 million investment, $50 million investment, they are expecting serious business operators to run a serious business for them. So that dynamic of the owners, or the proportion of people expecting serious businesses to be run seriously versus I've got a bright and shiny pretty hotel that I want to show off, has definitely grown. So expectations on hotel managers these days are very different. I missed the days, to be clear, of short blacks and golf with clients in the morning and cocktail parties in the evening, and managed to land the days where it was 12 hours of study the numbers, get to know the guests, and really make sure that the bottom line is meeting the targets. And you know, the 60s and 70s were a very good time to be a hotelier. Unfortunately, I missed those ones.
Yes.
How would you describe your leadership style, and what do you do specifically to build a great team?
It's hard answering a question like that one. I've learned to become less rigid in my leadership style over the years, I suppose. The bigger the team that you're dealing with, the less you can refine your team to exactly that model. So I suppose understanding diversity and really trying to understand and match the needs and wants of the team against the operation, and lining those up and steering people in the right direction is probably a large part of my day at the moment. You know, breakfast this morning with a hotel manager who was trying to decide Perth, Sydney or Europe in that young lady's mindset, and where her skills gaps were, and having to walk her through that. And honesty is a large part of that. So I suppose honesty, transparency are two of the foundations that I've always prided myself on. I'll give you an honest answer and a transparent answer with something to back it up. It may not be the answer that you want to hear, and sometimes it will be the answer you want to hear, but I'll be honest with you. And transparency sits there as far as the supporting of it.
But it sounds like you're very supportive. Sounds like you're a people person as much as you are a numbers person. Would I be right in making an analysis?
You'd have to ask my team that question, but I don't think I would have gotten here if I didn't have some people skills. And it's just as important as having the analytical skills. If you want to work in the industry, you do need to have a bit of both. It is very much a people industry, and as I said, it's becoming more and more a numbers game. You know, if you have overly people orientated team members, they need to be front of house and really focused on it. And if that's their strength, then you want to have the back of house team really well aligned with those strategic mindsets. And revenue managers and financial controllers are probably two classic examples of those skill sets, and really trying to match those up with people. I've seen plenty of financial controllers upset my front of house team and had to tell them to pull back a bit because they needed some help to communicate.
On the, and please put your hand up if you have questions. Revenue management seems to be the taste of the day at the moment.
It is.
In all sorts of areas. Now, I'm going to put a student on the spot, and I'm sorry. Chris, who is at the front here, passionate about revenue management, and we've been working with Chris My passion isn't revenue management, but I understand the importance of it and everything like that as well. Chris has just secured a position, a paid position, so not intern, through his studies as a GPP student, and obviously excels. He just secured that 2 days ago, so well done. So if we were to offer a little bit of advice for good old Chris, who's about to start that new job, for the one thing that maybe he should just focus on, because he's super, super excited, very excited. We might need to calm him down a little, right? Need to focus on one thing at a time, but what advice could you give him to start moving forward as he starts?
Keep it simple to begin with. Revenue managers can overcomplicate at times. It is a very complicated piece, and there isn't, especially in this day and age, there is so much data out there, and sometimes you need to work out how to distill that down. So when you're starting out, just start with the basics and get to know your business and your trends and your tools, and then start to become more, I suppose, start to learn the tricks. Just start to focus on the basics and get those right and really nail that before you broaden that scope, because there's so much out there that I think you could become overwhelmed quite easily and be there at 2 o'clock in the morning quite excited at night and trying to work out how you're going to manipulate your market. And I say that in the right way, not price fixing. But yeah, just don't become overwhelmed with it.
Yeah, I just have a question because my background before is like proprietary revenue management, like inside the property, and then the role that I've been secured is more into like cluster, and then need to take over like some properties. So what is your advice for that?
Understand that each property operates differently. So if you've made an assumption about a property that is heavily inbound orientated, you can't apply those same assumptions to a corporate or a leisure base. So understand your mix by property, understand what the sales and marketing team is focusing on to create that mix, and then understand what the market dynamics are for both the macro and the micro environment the property is sitting in.
Excellent. Well, I want to take this opportunity because, again, I said I could talk forever, but we have to do our work and life keeps on going. I'd like to thank you very much for the opportunity and time that you've given us today. You're obviously an outstanding contributor to the school. I've only been here for a short time, but it's been twice now that I've been in your presence, and it's been an absolute honour. And I thank you very much for giving the time to our students today.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.